So let me start this off by saying there will be absolutely no spoilers for the movie here in this review. This is a non-spoiler review for Black Widow. However, I am going to be talking pretty openly about the previous MCU installments, most notably Infinity War and Endgame. So if you've seen those movies, you're safe. As far as this movie goes, I will not be talking any spoilers on Black Widow. So let's go ahead and get into this. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Black Widow. So after over a year of delays due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are finally getting Black Widow in theaters, the solo film for the character that should have gotten solo films way earlier into the series. And like I mentioned earlier, I will be talking about Infinity War and Endgame pretty openly. And let's go ahead and get straight into this. I think we were all surprised to see that this movie was announced shortly after her character died in Endgame. I think we were all kind of surprised to see we were going to be getting a Black Widow movie. And to clear the confusion for anybody who's watching who does not know where this movie takes place, it's a prequel in the series, about midway through the series, or a little bit further than midway, but we see the events that happen after the events of Captain America Civil War, but before the events of Avengers Infinity War, kind of showing us what Natasha was doing in between that. And in a lot of ways, this movie feels like a side quest, like a video game side quest, but it's a good time. I had a lot of fun watching this movie, and it just felt great to be sitting back in the theaters watching a new MCU installment. I've loved WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki that's currently still airing and leading up to its final episode. But yeah, it's great to see a cinematic experience again for these characters, to be able to spend time with Natasha Romanoff, even though we know she is dead later on in the movies, and just be able to get a little bit of her backstory, because this movie does a good job of being a prequel while also being an origin story for Black Widow, while also pushing the story forward, giving us that connective tissue, and just ultimately it's just a fun, big, over-the-top spy espionage action film that has those comic book elements, but also has those grounded elements, and also is a family drama in a lot of ways. Overall, really great to see all the performances in this film. Really love Scarlett Johansson coming back to play the character. There was something a little bit strange about her performance in this film, where she felt a little bit more charismatic. She was constantly smirking and smiling. In this film, a little bit more so than you ever see her do in the other films, where she's a little bit more stoic, and when she does smirk or smile, it's kind of like a breaking of the mold in those moments. So I noticed that was happening a lot more in this movie, but ultimately she's great as the character, and I really enjoyed her in this film. Outside of that, you also have new characters being introduced to the franchise, or to the MCU. You have David Harbour in this film, and Rachel Weisz. You have Florence Pugh, who was easily probably the one that stole the show for me the most and was the funniest one in the film, and tons of other great people who show up throughout the course of the film. And what I really enjoyed about this film is, even though it did feel a bit like a side quest adventure, I think it really has a lot of heart. I really enjoyed the family drama element, being able to learn a little bit about Black Widow's background. And as somebody who's a comic book fan, it was nice to see them pull from the references and that storyline, but also do their own thing. It's really cool to be able to see these characters that were new to the franchise in terms of the live action element brought to screen in a great way. You know, you got Red Guardian in this film, and I guess oh my god, oh my fucking god. Overall, what I can say about this movie is that I found it to be a really good time. It's not the biggest in terms of its stakes, but I think it does a good job with its characters, though I did feel like there should have been a little bit more development. I wish that the family element was a little bit stronger through the film, because there is an element of the narrative for me that did feel a bit rushed, and overall the narrative for me was fairly predictable. I think the weakest part of this movie for me, without a doubt, are the villains, and the most notable villain to talk about in this movie is Taskmaster, who I'm a huge fan of from the comic books, and I've loved seeing that character appear in any sort of video game or animated series anytime they have. And the character is a really cool villain that has the ability to mask and mirror what these various other heroes or anybody that they see is doing, so they're able to copy different people. And that's a really cool character with a really cool ability skill set that they, kind of really utilize in the comic books in a lot of cool ways. And the movie utilizes that to an extent, but ultimately I wish they would have done more with it. I think the villains in this movie were super underdeveloped, and by the time the movie was over, in terms of the villains and their story and their arcs, I really couldn't have cared less about the villain element of the story. The movie really hones in specifically, I would say, on Scarlett Johansson and Florence Pugh. I think they are, without a doubt, are the strength of the film. I really enjoyed the action in this film as well, because there's a great blend of great stunt work on both a vehicular element, you have great stunt driving and different stuff like that as well, but then you also have the big over-the-top action, as well as some great grounded combat with some hand-to-hand combat that I thought was shot really well. It's fun to watch, it's engaging, it's exciting. But overall, just to kind of keep this quick and simple, this is a fun movie. It's not the best in the series, it's by no means points the worst in the series. It's not the most, world changing in the sense of the stakes. It's a very grounded, kind of very closed in story specific on Natasha and the family drama that's kind of thrown in with these various, family figures of her life that we're introduced to in this film. And the post-credit scene just leads us into some great epicness that I'm really excited for moving forward. But ultimately, yeah, I really enjoyed the film for what it was. There's not much more to say other than that. I think it's got some great action. I really enjoyed seeing characters like Taskmaster brought to screen, even if they didn't utilize them to their full ability. I wish the villain element of this film would have been a lot stronger, and I just wish we would have had a lot more character development, specifically on the family over the course of the film. They definitely developed the characters. You definitely understand far more about Black Widow and her storyline and everything that's happening in this movie by the time it's over. But yeah, I think ultimately there was a part of me that wanted to see more, wanted a little bit more time with these characters to really flesh them out 100%, because by the end of the movie, I just wish I cared a little bit more about them individually. I was just along for the ride, and I really, more than anything, cared about Black Widow. But thankfully, Florence Pugh was definitely a strength of the film, and that sister relationship between her and Scarlett Johansson in the film, I think they had great chemistry. I really believed it. I really bought into it, and ultimately is definitely the element that got me the most attached while I was watching it. I just wish that the villain element and some of the other story elements weren't as predictable or as, cookie cutter. I hate to put it that way because that makes it sound like the movie's bad, but it just in a lot of ways did have some generic action movie elements, but overall I really enjoyed the big fun over the top Marvel elements, and I enjoyed the connective tissue to the other movies and obviously the setup for future installments of things moving forward. And I just feel like Black Widow definitely deserved her own solo movie after all this time. Again, I wish it would have happened a lot sooner in the franchise. I wish we would have had more time with Natasha in her own solo films earlier and being able to kind of dive into her character and her background a little bit more, because it's definitely one of the darker in the comic books, and so it's cool that they were able to still kind of keep the essence of that darkness in her character here, even though of course like any other of these adaptations, they're adaptations, they're going to change things up from the comic books. But I enjoy that they kept a lot of things definitely very similar to her character's origins, and overall I had a good time. I think ultimately it was just a nice movie to sit back, eat some popcorn, eat some candy, drink some soda, and just kind of sit back and realize, wow, I'm watching a Marvel movie in theaters again after all this time. I think Scarlett Johansson was great, Florence Pugh was great, everybody else was really great too. David Harbour, Rachel Weisz, the main cast was really great. I think that definitely without a doubt the biggest disappointment has to be on the villain element of it, which tends to kind of make the stakes and some of the other things about the film kind of feel weaker, simply because if your villain isn't superimposing, if your villain isn't a huge part of the movie, then ultimately you can't really cling on to that element of the film overall. But the action and the funny moments and the character moments definitely kept this movie entertaining and fun to watch. It's definitely a movie I look forward to revisiting later on, and I'm not going to talk about any spoilers like I mentioned, but what I will say in terms of the post-credit scene is if you are not watching the Disney Plus series, then you need to get to all of those Disney Plus series ASAP, because this movie is definitely going to prove to you that if you haven't been watching those, you're going to be left behind. So that's all I'll say in terms of anything spoilery, but obviously you have no idea what that means. So a big thanks to you guys for watching. Sorry if this was a little bit all over the place. I'm not going to lie. I filmed this in about 6 or 7 different takes. Just kind of started getting flustered with the ring light in front of me. It was kind of hot in here, and I just feel like my mind was a little bit jumbled. So hopefully you guys understood what I was trying to say about the movie overall. But yeah, overall this was a fun watch for me. I enjoyed a lot about it, and I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. And for me, is this a movie that's worth going to check out in theaters? Absolutely. But I think if people check it out on Disney Plus, whatever the case may be, as long as you're watching the movie, I think it's definitely a fun Marvel time. And if you're a Marvel fan, I can't imagine you walk into this movie and hate it or dislike it. I think it's a good time, but I can understand maybe some people walking out of it thinking that it wasn't the most amazing thing, but I also didn't walk into it expecting it to be the most amazing thing. So I think that's part of why I enjoyed it for what it was, which was just a good, fun comic book movie time with Scarlett Johansson at the center of it, finally giving us a solo film for a character that, let's face it, definitely deserved it. I think when I look at all the female-led superhero movies that we've gotten in the last few years, I think the first Wonder Woman with Gal Gadot is definitely still my favorite of those, but just in terms of a comic book movie, this one is definitely a great good time. And in terms of just the MCU female movies, it's certainly a lot better than Captain Marvel in my opinion. And really quickly, I do want to praise the director Cate Shortland, who I've never really heard of before. She's an Australian director. I looked through her filmography, nothing of hers I've ever seen, but definitely enjoyed her directorial style, and I enjoyed the way that she fit into the MCU while also kind of having her own kind of darker and grittier style to the way that she chose to tell the story, while again still keeping it light and fun. Just definitely wanted to give a shout out to the director Cate Shortland, because I'm definitely interested to check out more of her work as time goes on. So yeah guys, that's gonna be my thoughts on Black Widow. Can't wait to hear what you guys have to say down below in the comment section. Did you like this movie? Did you not like this movie? Have you not seen it, and are you planning on seeing it? Answer any and all of those questions down below. Please hit that like button because it helps the channel out. Comment your thoughts, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, Bye-bye.